there's a great book on this called From Barbarians to Bureaucrats. It's like one of my favorite books I reference all the time. It's got a really great model for this. It describes how there's different archetypes of people you have at different stages of the company. So you start out with the prophet who effectively comes down from the mountains with a story around a vision for the world that they want to create. And they use that story as kind of like capital, like emotional capital, to attract a bunch of barbarians who just run around and like the chaos and like do the first version of something. And they're like, yeah, we did one. And then they attract some builders like, oh, they've done something interesting. Like, let's see if we can, I don't know, build them some tools to make it slightly better. And then the builders attract administrators like, okay, well, let's do a process so we can train more people to do this. The administrators attract bureaucrats who start to manage the process of building processes. And then they eventually attract like the aristocrats who kind of come in and, you know, just play politics all day. But it's like everyone is at different stages of that life cycle around where they can add value and what they enjoy. You know, some people love the chaos. I know lots of people who would hate the chaos, and it would just be the worst job ever if everything was on fire all the time. I think it's rare to have the ability to deal with all of those different points of the curve. No one grows up thinking, I'm going to be an employee. Right? That's something that society guides us towards. And, you know, and I'm not saying like there's a big person at the top trying to control it. I just think that enough people are employees that it becomes the norm and people don't like to deviate from the norm. But if you look historically, employment was not the standard way. You know, most people, it would be a family business, or, you know, you'd be working a farm, and whilst you might have a landowner, it would be your farm. So I think that on one side, I don't think entrepreneurship is a thing that you're born with. I do think there are people that are more wired to it than others. And I think that's more like psychological and also like a little bit of genetics. So I did my DNA analysis 23andMe, and what's really interesting if you have done that is that there's a load of companies you can upload that data to, and they'll give you additional insights. One of the ones that I took it to, they analyzed it, and there was this section on like your kind of how your genes affect your mindset and your worldview. And there was like 5 or 6 genes about your levels of fear, and all of mine were on the lowest end of the spectrum. So like all the possible genes that they have studies for that impact your perception of fear are all basically turned off. And I think that's why I can deal with the chaos, because I don't get stressed by it. But I wanted to go back and start all over again, do the 0 to 1, the building, barbarian, chaos stuff. But I knew I wanted to have a little bit of a kind of an end of chapter experience. You know, just like this had been a big part of my 20s, was building that. And so I ended up going to Nicaragua for 3 months, which is a very random country. It's probably one of the least touristy places out there. But I ended up going because I had a bunch. I lived in San Francisco about 8 years ago, and some friends of a friends all decided during COVID to work remotely in Hawaii. And then like a similar group of those people decided, hey, we want to do Costa Rica, but then they looked to Costa Rica versus Nicaragua, and like Nicaragua is a lot cheaper. So I ended up in Nicaragua for 3 months in an Airbnb looking out over the ocean with a bunch of other smart, interesting people. And one bit of advice, go try work remotely for a few months if you can, get it from your work. Like, it is a great experience.
Something I learned, because I worked, when I was at BT, I worked for a chap called Peter Morgan. He was kind of senior in the organization. He'd climbed all the ranks and had done some fantastic things, but was telling me about adventure and about wanting to write a book and motorbike around the world. And that was one of the things that pushed me into working for this different chap called Peter, because it just seemed exciting, and I really wanted to do that rather than join the grad program. So that kind of gives you the background to it. It was like, I could be at this company for 20 years and then think, what if? So I thought I'd just do the what if and see what would happen. I didn't have a business degree. Learning about everything in a startup and how a startup operates and what you need would be the biggest learnings. And also being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'm not sure if you can ever be comfortable with the uncomfortable, but learning to be as comfortable as you can in that. So
yeah, like being pushed beyond your comfort zone essentially. And I think a lot of people say that's where people really grow, when they pushed that sort of, when they're not familiar with this lifestyle, I would say.
yeah, so whether that's kind of negotiating contracts with large organizations where you've never done it before, whether it is looking at runway and understanding that there's not much runway, and being comfortable knowing that, and being comfortable in the changing nature of what it is you're building as a product, and knowing from 1 month to the next things might look a little bit different. It's very different to the big corporate world where you kind of sit in your own little boxes, being comfortable that you could be designing one day or talking to press another or doing a commercial deal, these types of things.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many aspects to it. I think that would be the biggest personal development, being comfortable in the uncomfortable. There's a saying, isn't there? We expect too much in 1 year and not enough in 10. And I think that's incredibly true. Like, to understand how the world of payments works in a year, you are not going to understand it that quickly, or it's going to take you time. To understand your customers is going to take you time. You may have to do a number of pivots to find product market fit. All of it takes time. So if you're going into a startup, don't think that you're going to get overnight success.
Perfectly put. And I think a lot of people are put off by that, or have to invest 10 years of my life into this. I can't do that. It's like, you can. It doesn't matter if you don't know all the skills or all the knowledge that you need. You'll learn it over time. It's just about going for it. And
yeah, it's skill building. People want to learn to play the guitar. Yeah, it takes time. I've never had the patience to learn the guitar. I've always wanted to learn the guitar, but never had the patience to do it. And it's the same with anything, whether it's a career, starting off as a junior and climbing the ranks, or whether it's a startup. It takes time to understand all the aspects of what you need to know.
Don't come in thinking that it's almost that fable of like a little bit of knowledge is more dangerous than none at all. I think there's sometimes non-technical founders try to apply a little bit of knowledge and get themselves into a rabbit hole where if they just came in and said, look, I don't really know what I want, but I know the business really well, and I know my vertical really well, and describe that really well, and sort of look at the problem, look at the process, and then let technical expert, whether that even just be an advisor or whatever, fill in the blanks. I think that's the best way to do it, because then both parties are playing to their strengths. It's not like a non-technical founder is trying to look technical to appear more credible to investors or anything. There's no you don't want to be doing that. You should focus on where your strengths are, and then find somebody, whether that be a person, a company, a mentor, whatever, who can fill in the blanks effectively. Totally playing to your strengths and totally not trying to potentially learn to code fully just to try and develop your own MVP, when you could spend 12 months doing amazing business development and amazing kind of market research and amazing customer conversations instead. So I think totally playing to your strengths, using your time to your advantage, filling in the gaps either with people who know what they're doing or tools and services. So there's so much no code and low code technology out there that you can spend maybe a few hours or a few days learning some of those tools and build something that lets you at least prove the concept before you approach someone technical. So I think totally playing to your strengths, and maybe having some customer conversations, doing some validation, building something to then validate with, and then approaching someone technical to come in and be like, look, I've managed to build this. I don't really know how it works under the hood, but you will, and could you advise me how to make it properly? You've got to, as a startup, you've got to think about who you're speaking to, and you'll have 1,000 voices coming at you from various angles a lot of the time, and you've got to think about who you're speaking to, think about what their experience is, and they might have done something amazing, but in a totally different role to starting a startup, or they might have done an amazing startup, but in a totally different era or totally different vertical or something. So you've got to put everything into a bit of, I think, you're taking advice, and you've got to ultimately, you can have as many brilliant advisors as you want, but you've got to know almost how to control that advice and how to apply that advice, which I think can be certainly like an element of the battle. But I think once you crack that, then it's great because you can just get as much advice as you want, put everything into perspective, and then almost like filter it down like effectively like a marketing funnel, dare I say.